Colin Lucas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dowd. It's a pleasure to serve with you in the chair, and I want to give my congratulations to Peter Packham for starting this petition and to the Honourable Member for Linlithgow and East Falkirk for introducing it with such customary eloquence. My Brighton Pavilion constituency has the second highest number of signatories to this petition, with 655 of my constituents signing it. And I know very well that many, many more than that support it. So I'm very pleased to be able to represent them here today. And one of that number, in an email about today's debate, wrote, and I quote, "I firmly believe that the public were misled systematically by campaigners for Brexit before the referendum. Although it's unlikely that the decision will be reversed, I believe that the record should show the truth, not a fantasy." Well, that short, simple message encapsulates some of the very many important reasons why I think we do need an inquiry and why I back the call made in the petition. And I do believe that if a sufficient number of people over time choose it, there is a way back into the European Union. That is the virtue and beauty of democracy. Now, the referendum campaign and the subsequent narrative about Brexit have been a litany of misinformation and disinformation. The infamous words on the side of the bus are just the tip of the iceberg, but let's start there. Whether that was the £350 million a week has been diverted from the EU towards the NHS. Well, as we've heard already several times this afternoon, the simple answer is no. The NHS budget in England alone has risen by more than £350 million a week since 2016, but that money has come from taxes, from borrowing, from squeezing other departments. It most certainly has not come from savings arising from Brexit, for the simple reason that those savings didn't materialise because the overall economic impact has been so severe. If the public hoped for a transformative sum for the NHS post-Brexit, they most certainly have not received it. Turning to the economy, during the Chancellor's recent autumn statement, he spoke for almost an hour without once acknowledging the economic catastrophe of Brexit. No reference to the OBR's warning that it will slash productivity by 4%, lead to a 15% drop in trade intensity, an 11% drop in investment, that it will increase food prices, deliver lower wages, workforce shortages, and the highest inflation in the G7. Now, I too am a member of the UK Trade and Business Commission, expertly chaired by the Right Honourable Member for Leeds Central. And since July 2021, we have been taking evidence about the impacts of Brexit. And as the Honourable Member has pointed out, we have not heard of these positive impacts that were claimed for it. To the contrary, what we've heard time and again is all of the evidence of the pain for small business in particular, and in particular why Brexit is seen as the primary reason we're the only G7 country still not reaching post-pandemic levels of growth. Yet whilst the government continues to keep its head firmly in the sand, denying anything other than positive outcomes, it cannot begin to adapt and resolve some of the many problems we're hearing are caused by Brexit. Misleading the public includes by wishful thinking, and who can forget those endless conjurings of sunlit uplands, ignoring reality, only telling half the story, cherry-picking and frankly plain lying. It all happened during the Brexit campaign, and it's happened since. Independent scrutiny and inquiry would help to set the record straight. Now, the leader of the Leave campaign's vilification of free movement, I think, was one of the most pernicious examples of that disinformation. Yeah. They willfully perpetuated a hostile narrative about immigration, deliberately conflating asylum seekers, economic migrants and refugees, whipping up hatred and racism in the process. This was disinformation at its most destructive. And no wonder they're now so afraid of a light being shone on those impacts. And that brings me to the issue of democracy, because in the wake of the referendum, I set up an initiative called Dear Leavers. And we went around the country, visiting those places that had registered some of the highest Leave votes, and listened to people who voted Leave. And the overwhelming message was that people voted for Brexit because they felt powerless. They felt unheard by a political establishment that had not listened for decades. And frankly, the tragedy is that the political establishment is still not listening, and people still feel powerless. Democracy, scrutiny, accountability, responsiveness have all been victims of Brexit. Evidence and experts were derided, Parliament was illegally prorogued, international law has been trashed. from unsettled constitutional questions to opposition to a ratification referendum, from the impact on the incredibly precious Good Friday Agreement to the dangerous retained EU law bill. Opposing a public inquiry into these matters, frankly, only adds insult to injury. Now, returning to my constituents' view that the Brexit decision will probably not be reversed, I have to say that it is with great sadness that I see that the Labour leadership has capitulated to the tyranny where even to talk about rejoining is somehow judged to be anti-democratic. I want to talk about it. The Green Party wants to talk about it. I think the public deserves that we should talk about it. If rejoining the EU is the right thing for our economy, for our environment, for workers' rights, for young people, for our public services, for trade and for more, then we should take that step when the time and the conditions are right. And we should be preparing for that possibility, taking step-by-step approach, such as negotiating membership now of the Customs Union, full engagement with Horizon, regular adjustments to the Trade and Cooperation Agreement to ensure our interests are best supported, a general approach of maintaining alignment with EU regulations, so that means the back of that deeply dangerous retained EU law bill, the ongoing rebuilding of diplomacy, and I hope the ongoing rebuilding of our reputation as a trustworthy partner, which has frankly been trashed. But I want to talk about the status quo in this country too, because the Leave vote was a howl of rage about legitimate concerns which have still not been addressed. The social contract remains broken, the power game remains rigged. We didn't leave the EU because of anything that happened in Brussels or Strasbourg. We left primarily because what had happened in England. Because outside of the capital, every single region of England voted to leave the EU. And it's meant as no respect to Wales, primarily, which voted by a majority of only about 80,000 to leave. It's no disrespect to Wales to say it was an English vote that drove Brexit.
I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. It is significant that the highest vote in favour of leaving the European Union was recorded in Blaenau Gwent. Blaenau Gwent is also the constituency which received the highest level of European funding, but it is also the poorest constituency in Wales, and that reinforces the point that she was making. It was a howl of rage against poverty, against marginalisation, and all the rest of it.
I agree with him very much, and I believe one of the reasons that in England there was such a howl of rage was that because, while devolution has given powers to Scotland and Wales, not enough, but some powers, at the same time there are no political institutions that represent England, nothing to give political expression to our complex, rich reality, nothing to bring power to the regions of England. No wonder people voted to take back control, but they want control from Westminster, so they have the right to be able to make decisions about their own lives here. And so rethinking of our constitutional settlement more fundamentally, I think, is also key to mending some of the divisions in the UK. Brexit was the result of a divided UK, and it threatens to divide us still further unless we build a democratic consensus about changing that together for good.
Here, here. Very good. Stella Creasy.